Marcus Chun adjusted his environmental suit one final time as he stepped out of the transport shuttle onto the metallic platform of Processing Station Gamma 7. The atmosphere readings on his heads-up display flickered ominously. Toxic methane clouds swirled overhead while acid rain pelted his visor with soft pinging sounds. Kepler 442c was everything the safety briefings had warned him about, and worse. The planet's surface was a nightmare of crystalline formations that could slice through standard-grade steel, and the native wildlife was so aggressively territorial that the Galactic Survey Corps had classified the entire world as a Class X death zone. Another beautiful day in paradise, Marcus muttered to himself, his voice crackling through the comm system as he hefted his toolkit and began walking toward the massive atmospheric processing units that dotted the landscape like mechanical mountains. These towering structures were humanity's attempt to slowly terraform sections of the planet, a project that would take centuries and had already claimed dozens of lives. The morning shift had been uneventful so far. Marcus had successfully recalibrated 3 air scrubbers and replaced a corroded intake valve on Processing Unit 4 without incident. His movements were efficient and practiced. He'd been working these death trap planets for nearly 8 years now, ever since the Terran Colonial Authority had discovered that humans possessed an almost supernatural ability to adapt to environments that would kill most other sentient species within minutes. It was during his approach to Processing Unit 7 that Marcus first noticed something was wrong. His motion sensors were picking up a heat signature that shouldn't have been there. According to the daily briefing, this sector had been cleared by the automated defense drones just 6 hours ago. Nothing larger than an insect should have been able to penetrate the electromagnetic barriers that surrounded the work zones. Marcus paused beside a cluster of twisted metal struts that formed the base of the processing unit and checked his scanner readings again. The heat signature was small, but intense, approximately 2 meters above ground level, and moving in an erratic pattern. His training kicked in immediately. When working on hostile worlds, any unexpected life sign was potentially lethal. Control, this is Chun on Gamma 7. I'm reading an unidentified biological signature near Processing Unit 7, requesting verification of perimeter status. Marcus kept his voice calm and professional, but his hand instinctively moved to the plasma cutter on his belt. The tool was designed for maintenance work, but it could serve as an emergency weapon if necessary. The response crackled through his comm system after a brief delay. Gamma 7, control here. Perimeter shows green across all sectors. Drones completed their sweep at 0600 hours with no contacts. You're probably picking up residual heat from yesterday's volcanic activity. Proceed with caution and report any visual confirmation. Marcus acknowledged the transmission, but remained alert as he approached the base of the massive processing unit. The structure rose nearly 200 meters into the poisonous sky, its surface covered with pipes, ventilation grates, and maintenance ladders. The heat signature on his scanner was now stationary, positioned somewhere near the main access ladder that led up to the primary control systems. As he rounded a support strut the size of a building, Marcus finally saw the source of his scanner's alerts. Clinging to the ladder, approximately 3 meters off the ground, was a creature unlike anything he'd encountered in his years of working frontier worlds. It was roughly the size of a large house cat, covered in what appeared to be iridescent scales that shifted from deep purple to electric blue as it moved. 6 legs, ending in razor-sharp claws, gripped the ladder rungs with ease, while a long, flexible tail whipped back and forth in apparent agitation. But it was the creature's head that made Marcus's blood run cold. Even in its juvenile state, the alien skull was clearly designed for one purpose: killing. Rows of needle-sharp teeth filled a jaw that could probably snap through steel cable, while 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern tracked every movement in its vicinity with predatory intensity. This was definitely one of the indigenous life forms that made Kepler 442c so incredibly dangerous. Marcus froze in place, his mind racing through his emergency protocols. The standard procedure was clear: retreat immediately and call for arm support. These creatures were known to be pack hunters with toxin-laced claws and teeth. Even a juvenile could deliver a bite that would kill a human in minutes, suit or no suit. But as Marcus slowly began backing away, something unexpected happened. The creature turned its quad-eyed gaze directly toward him and made a sound that was completely unlike anything described in the threat assessment files. Instead of a threatening hiss or growl, it produced a series of soft chirping noises that sounded almost plaintive. The alien shifted its position on the ladder, and Marcus noticed for the first time that it appeared to be favoring one of its rear legs. A closer look revealed what appeared to be a significant injury. Dark fluid matted the scales around what might have been a deep gash, and the leg hung at an unnatural angle. This wasn't a hunting predator lying in ambush. This was an injured youngster that had somehow become separated from its pack. "Control, I've got a visual on the biological contact," Marcus reported, never taking his eyes off the creature. "It appears to be a juvenile indigenous predator, approximately 6 kilograms, showing signs of injury. Requesting immediate extraction and armed backup. Negative, Gamma 7. We've got 3 emergency situations in progress across the processing grid. Armed teams are committed for at least 4 hours. Can you maintain safe distance until support arrives?" Marcus looked at the injured creature, which continued making those soft chirping sounds while staring at him with what he could only describe as hopeful expression. The rational part of his mind screamed that he should retreat to a safe distance and wait for backup. Every piece of training he'd received said that approaching an unknown predator species was suicide, even if it appeared injured. But Marcus had grown up on the farming colonies of New Terra, where injured animals were a common sight. There was something about the creature's posture and vocalizations that reminded him of the livestock he'd cared for as a child. The way it tilted its head when it looked at him, the careful way it held its injured leg, even the tone of its chirping calls, it all suggested an intelligence that went beyond mere animal instinct. "Roger that, Control. I'll maintain safe distance and continue monitoring." Marcus lied smoothly, already beginning to slowly approach the ladder. His decision was made not by logic, but by something deeper, a peculiarly human combination of curiosity, compassion, and the kind of stubborn refusal to abandon a creature in need that had made his species simultaneously loved and feared throughout the galaxy. The alien watched his approach with apparent fascination rather than fear. As Marcus drew closer, he could see that the creature's scales actually contained thousands of microscopic filaments that created the shifting color patterns. Its 4 eyes tracked independently at first, then synchronized to focus on his movements with startling intelligence. "Easy there, little one," Marcus found himself saying, his voice automatically shifting to the gentle tone he'd once used with frightened animals. "I'm not going to hurt you. Let's see what we can do about that leg." When Marcus reached the base of the ladder, the creature made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of fleeing or attacking, it carefully began climbing down toward him, moving with obvious pain, but maintaining eye contact throughout its descent. When it reached the lowest rung of the ladder, it paused and extended its uninjured front leg toward Marcus in what appeared to be a tentative gesture of trust. Without thinking, Marcus reached out with his gloved hand and gently touched the offered appendage. The creature's scales felt warm even through his environmental suit, and he could feel the powerful muscles beneath its exotic hide. The alien made another soft, chirping sound, and, in a move that defied everything Marcus knew about predator behavior, it carefully climbed onto his extended arm. "Well, I'll be damned," Marcus whispered as the creature settled onto his forearm with surprising gentleness. Its claws, which could have easily shredded his suit material, remained carefully sheathed as it balanced itself against the slight movement of his arm. "You're not what the file said you were, are you?" The alien tilted its head in response to his voice, and Marcus swore he could see intelligence and understanding in those alien eyes. It was smaller than he'd first thought, probably no more than 4 kilograms, and clearly very young based on the proportions of its head-to-body ratio. The injury to its rear leg looked serious, but not immediately life-threatening. And now that he was closer, Marcus could see that the dark fluid was already beginning to clot. Marcus chunned to control, he said, making another decision that his training manual would have classified as criminally insane. I'm bringing in a wounded indigenous life form for medical assessment. The creature appears to be docile and is not presenting an immediate threat. The response was immediate and predictably negative. Absolutely not, Gamma 7. You are expressly forbidden from making contact with indigenous life forms. Retreat to safe distance immediately and wait for armed backup. Marcus looked down at the creature, which had now curled its tail around his arm in what appeared to be a gesture of security rather than restraint. Its breathing seemed labored, and he was certain that without treatment, the injury would become infected and kill it within days. The practical thing to do would be to follow orders, put the creature back on the ladder, and retreat to safety. Instead, Marcus did something that would become the stuff of legend among the maintenance crews of a dozen worlds. He carefully adjusted his position so that the creature was secured against his chest, activated his emergency beacon to mask his true location from the control center, and began walking toward his scheduled maintenance objectives with his new passenger firmly attached to his environmental suit. Control, Gamma 7. I'm experiencing some interference with my position beacon, but continuing with scheduled maintenance tasks. We'll report status in 1 hour. What Marcus couldn't know, as he began what he thought would be a simple good deed, was that his actions were being observed from multiple locations. High above in the toxic clouds, a pack of adult predators circled in growing agitation, their offspring's distress calls having drawn them to the processing facility despite the electromagnetic barriers they normally avoided. On the planet's surface, automated security systems were beginning to register heat signatures, moving in coordinated patterns toward the work zone. And in the depths of space, a Galactic Council monitoring station had detected the unusual biological readings from Kepler 442c and was already preparing to dispatch a research vessel to investigate what appeared to be the first recorded instance of peaceful contact between humans and one of the galaxy's most feared predator species. Marcus walked steadily toward Processing Unit 8, completely unaware that his simple act of kindness toward an injured animal was about to trigger a chain of events that would reshape humanity's relationship with the wider galaxy. The creature on his arm chirped softly as he walked, its 4 eyes scanning their surroundings while its powerful body remained relaxed against his chest. For the first time in months, Marcus found himself actually enjoying a work shift. There was something deeply satisfying about having a companion, even one that could theoretically bite his head off if it chose to. The creature seemed content to simply observe their surroundings, occasionally making soft vocalizations that Marcus began to interpret as expressions of curiosity or interest. As they approached the next processing unit, Marcus began to whistle softly under his breath, an old farm song his grandfather had taught him years ago. The creature, which he'd started calling Scout, due to its habit of scanning their surroundings with those 4 independently moving eyes, had proven to be surprisingly helpful during his maintenance tasks. When Marcus needed to access tight spaces between pipes or examine hard-to-reach connections, Scout would carefully position itself to provide additional illumination by reflecting light off its iridescent scales at precisely the right angles. "Hand me that coupling wrench," Marcus said absently as he worked on a stubborn atmosphere processor valve, then paused and chuckled at himself. "Sorry, Scout. I keep forgetting you don't have hands. Or understand English, for that matter." Scout responded with a series of musical chirps that had become increasingly complex over the past few hours. The creature had somehow learned to modulate its vocalizations to match different tools in Marcus's kit. High, precise tones for small components, deeper harmonic notes for heavy equipment. It was as if Scout was learning to communicate through the language of maintenance work itself. Marcus was so focused on their synchronized routine that he almost missed the warning indicators beginning to flash on his heads-up display. His proximity sensors were detecting multiple large heat signatures moving through the area, converging on their location from several directions. The readings were unlike anything he'd seen before. These weren't the chaotic thermal patterns of geological activity or the regular signatures of automated equipment. These were organized, purposeful, and approaching at a rate that suggested intelligent coordination. Control, this is Gamma 7. Marcus called in as he completed the valve repair and began gathering his tools. I'm reading multiple large biological contacts approaching my position, requesting immediate guidance. The response came back after an unusually long delay, and Marcus could hear multiple voices conferring in the background before the controller's voice returned. Gamma 7, we're tracking the same contacts. Initial analysis suggests adult indigenous predators, estimated 12 to 15 individuals. Implementing emergency evacuation protocols immediately. Proceed to nearest extraction point at maximum speed. Marcus felt his blood chill as he looked down at Scout, who had suddenly become very still against his chest. The creature's scales had shifted to a deep red coloration he hadn't seen before, and its four eyes were now all focused in the same direction, staring toward a cluster of processing towers about half a kilometer away. Scout's tail tightened around Marcus's arm, not painfully, but with obvious urgency. Scout, I think those are your family members coming to look for you, Marcus said quietly, his mind racing through possible courses of action. The nearest extraction point was nearly 2 kilometers away across open ground, too far to reach before the approaching predators arrived. The processing units offered some protection with their electromagnetic barriers, but those systems were designed to deter individual animals, not coordinated pack attacks. Scout made a series of urgent chirping sounds and began climbing higher up Marcus's body, positioning itself directly behind his helmet where it could see in all directions. The creature's behavior had shifted dramatically from the relaxed curiosity it had shown earlier to something that Marcus recognized as protective alertness. Scout wasn't trying to flee back to its pack. It was taking a defensive position to guard Marcus's blind spots. Control, I've got a problem here, Marcus reported as he began moving toward the relative shelter of Processing Unit 9, the largest structure in the immediate area. The juvenile I reported earlier seems to be staying with me rather than returning to its pack. This could complicate the extraction. Negative Gamma 7. Drop the creature immediately and proceed to extraction. That's a direct order. Marcus looked at Scout, who was now making soft, almost conversational sounds while maintaining its protective position. The creature had been injured and alone when he found it, and despite being reunited with its pack, it was choosing to remain with him. There was something profoundly moving about that level of trust, especially from a species that supposedly operated on pure predatory instinct. Sorry, Control, but that's not happening. Scout's staying with me. The first adult predator appeared around the base of Processing Unit 7 like something out of humanity's deepest nightmares. It was approximately 3 meters long and stood nearly 2 meters high at the shoulder, covered in the same iridescent scales as Scout, but with coloration that shifted through aggressive reds and oranges. 6 powerful legs, ending in claws the size of combat knives, carried it across the broken terrain with fluid grace, while its massive head constantly scanned for threats with intelligence that was clearly far beyond simple animal cunning. But what made Marcus's heart skip a beat was the way the creature moved. There was no wild, uncontrolled aggression in its approach. Instead, it displayed the kind of tactical awareness that Marcus associated with trained military units. The adult predator used available cover effectively, paused to assess potential threats, and coordinated its movements with other pack members who were approaching from different angles. Scout chirped loudly and received an immediate response from the approaching adult, a complex series of harmonic vocalizations that lasted nearly 30 seconds. Marcus couldn't understand the communication, but the emotional content was unmistakable. Relief, concern, warning, and what sounded suspiciously like affection all wove through the exchange between the young creature and what was obviously its parent. "Well, Scout, I think your mother just found us," Marcus said quietly as he positioned himself behind a heavy support strut. "Any chance you could explain to her that I'm one of the good guys? More adult predators began appearing around the processing unit, and Marcus realized with growing amazement that they were displaying classic protective behavior rather than hunting patterns. These creatures weren't stalking prey. They were conducting a rescue operation to retrieve their missing pack member. The adults maintained careful distances and avoided aggressive postures while keeping watchful eyes on both Marcus and their offspring. Scout continued its musical conversation with the pack, and Marcus began to notice something extraordinary happening. The creature was incorporating sounds from his earlier whistling into its vocalizations, creating musical bridges between its natural communication and the human melody it had learned. It was as if Scout was trying to introduce the concept of humans as musical beings to its family. The largest of the adult predators, presumably the pack leader, approached to within about 10 meters and settled into a sitting position that was clearly non-threatening. Its four eyes focused intently on Marcus while it listened to Scout's continued chirping. The massive creature tilted its head in a gesture that was remarkably similar to Scout's expression of curiosity. "Control, you're not going to believe this," Marcus reported, his voice filled with wonder. "The adult predators aren't attacking. They're just watching. It's like they're trying to figure out what I am." "That's impossible, Gamma 7. All previous encounters with this species have resulted in immediate aggressive behavior. Maintain defensive positions and wait for arm support." Marcus found himself doing something that went against every survival instinct he possessed. He slowly raised his hand and began whistling the same melody he'd shared with Scout earlier. The reaction from the pack was immediate and startling. Several of the adults began producing harmonic accompaniments, their deep voices creating a complex musical arrangement that resonated through the metal structures around them. Scout joined the impromptu concert with obvious delight, its higher-pitched vocalizations weaving through the adult voices like a soprano soloist with a full choir. For several minutes, Marcus found himself conducting an alien orchestra in what might have been the strangest performance in galactic history. When the music faded, something fundamental had changed in the atmosphere. The adult predators were no longer watching Marcus with caution or confusion. Instead, their posture and movement suggested genuine curiosity and, incredibly, what appeared to be approval. The pack leader made a series of soft sounds toward Scout, who responded with enthusiastic chirping before settling more comfortably against Marcus's back. "I think Scout just got permission to stay with me," Marcus said in amazement. "Control, I need to report a first contact situation. These creatures aren't mindless predators. They're intelligent, social, and apparently musical. We may have seriously misjudged this species." The response from Control was predictably bureaucratic. "Gamma 7, you are not qualified to make first contact determinations. Maintain current position until proper xenobiological teams can be deployed." But Marcus was already learning that bureaucratic protocols meant very little when dealing with creatures that operated on their own sophisticated social rules. The pack had apparently decided that he was an acceptable guardian for their youngster, at least temporarily. Several adults settled into relaxed positions around the processing unit, creating a protective perimeter while continuing their musical conversations with Scout. As Marcus resumed his maintenance work, now surrounded by a pack of creatures that could have killed him in seconds, he began to understand something profound about the nature of intelligence and cooperation. These beings weren't the savage monsters described in the survey reports. They were a complex social species with their own forms of art, communication, and apparently even child-rearing practices that included fostering relationships with other intelligent beings. Scout had become increasingly animated as the afternoon progressed, pointing out interesting features of the machinery to its pack members and incorporating new mechanical sounds into its vocalizations. The young creature was clearly learning from both its human companion and its alien family, building bridges between two completely different forms of intelligence. The pack leader approached Marcus's work area as he was completing a routine inspection of the atmospheric scrubbers. The massive predator moved with careful deliberation, stopping just close enough for Marcus to see the intricate patterns in its scales and the unmistakable intelligence in its eyes. For a long moment, human and alien regarded each other in silence. Then, the pack leader did something that would be talked about in xenobiological circles for decades to come. It carefully extended one massive claw and gently touched Marcus's helmet, much as Scout had touched his hand earlier. The gesture was clearly intentional, a conscious decision to make peaceful contact with an alien being. "Hello to you too," Marcus said softly, reaching up to touch the creature's claw with his gloved hand. "Thank you for trusting me with your child." The pack leader's response was a deep, complex vocalization that seemed to contain multiple layers of meaning. Scout immediately began translating, chirping excitedly while the adults listened with obvious attention. Marcus had the distinct impression that he was being discussed by a family trying to decide whether the strange new creature their child had adopted was safe to keep around. As the day continued, Marcus found himself working with the most unusual maintenance crew in human history. Scout continued providing illumination and tool guidance, while the adult pack members began helping in their own ways. One particularly large individual learned to hold pipes steady, while Marcus made connections. Another discovered that its claws were perfect for cleaning debris from intake filters. Within hours, they had developed an efficient working relationship that accomplished more in a single shift than Marcus usually managed in 3. The bureaucrats back at control were undoubtedly having nervous breakdowns, but Marcus had never enjoyed a workday more. He was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history, a working partnership between humans and one of the most feared predator species in known space. And at the center of it all was Scout, a young creature whose simple need for help had bridged the gap between two completely different forms of intelligence. As the day wore on and the work progressed, Marcus began to realize that he was no longer just a maintenance worker on a hostile world. He had become an unwitting ambassador between species, and Scout had become both his translator and his passport to a form of first contact that no one had ever imagined possible. 6 hours into the most extraordinary shift of his life, Marcus's peaceful working arrangement with the Predator Pack was shattered by an alarm that made his blood freeze. His environmental suit's proximity sensors erupted in a cascade of warning signals as hundreds of heat signatures appeared on the horizon, moving toward their position at incredible speed. "Control, this is Gamma 7, Marcus called urgently as he watched the readings multiply across his display. "I'm detecting massive biological movement incoming from the south. Whatever's coming, it's big, fast, and there are a lot of them." "We see it too, Gamma 7. Preliminary analysis suggests a territorial swarm response. The indigenous creatures you've been in contact with may have triggered a defensive reaction from a larger colony. Emergency extraction is inbound. Estimated arrival 12 minutes. Marcus looked around at the pack members, who had suddenly become agitated in a way he hadn't seen before. Their scales had shifted to dark, warning colors, and their vocalizations had changed from the musical tones he'd grown accustomed to into sharp, urgent calls that clearly indicated immediate danger. Scout pressed closer against his back, its small body trembling with fear. The pack leader approached Marcus and made a series of complex vocalizations while gesturing with its massive head toward the approaching swarm. Even without understanding the language, the message was clear. Whatever was coming wasn't friendly to anyone, human or predator alike. "Scout, I think your family is trying to tell me something important," Marcus said as he watched the adults begin forming defensive positions around the processing unit. The pack's behavior had shifted completely from the relaxed cooperation of the afternoon to the kind of coordinated military response he'd seen in elite combat units. Through his suit's enhanced optics, Marcus caught his first glimpse of what was approaching across the toxic landscape. The swarm consisted of creatures that made Scout's pack look like gentle house pets by comparison. These were insects the size of small aircraft, with chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed like black metal and wingspans that could generate the kind of atmosphere displacement that would knock a human flat. They moved in perfect formation, thousands of them, creating a living storm cloud that darkened the already hostile sky. "Control, I need immediate clarification on indigenous species classification," Marcus called as he began gathering his emergency equipment. Are we dealing with territorial insects or something else entirely? Negative data available, Gamma 7. This is the first recorded swarm event on Kepler 442c. All we know is that they appear to be responding to the electromagnetic signatures from the processing units. Estimate 8 minutes to contact. Scout made an urgent chirping sound and pointed one claw toward a maintenance hatch at the base of Processing Unit 9. The pack leader immediately moved toward the same location, using its powerful claws to tear away the protective covering that sealed the hatch. Behind the metal barrier was an access tunnel that led deep into the unit's internal systems, not designed for human occupancy, but potentially large enough to provide shelter. Smart thinking, Scout, Marcus said as he realized what the aliens were suggesting. But there's no way your family's going to fit in there with us. The pack leader seemed to understand Marcus's concern and made a decision that revealed the true nobility of these misunderstood creatures. Instead of seeking their own safety, the adults began positioning themselves in a defensive perimeter around the access tunnel, preparing to face the swarm in order to protect both the human and their young pack member. Marcus felt a surge of emotion that caught him completely off guard. These beings had known him for less than a day, yet they were willing to risk their lives to ensure his survival. It was a level of selfless courage that he'd rarely encountered even among his own species. Control, I'm going to the maintenance tunnels of Processing Unit 9 with the juvenile indigenous creature, Marcus reported as he approached the access hatch. The adult pack members are taking defensive positions to protect our location. I need you to understand, these aren't mindless predators. They're intelligent beings capable of sacrifice and honor. Acknowledged Gamma 7, but we can't factor indigenous behavior into extraction protocols. Maintain your position and wait for armed support. As Marcus squeezed through the access hatch with Scout clinging to his back, he could already hear the approaching sound of the swarm, a deep, thrumming vibration that seemed to make the entire processing unit resonate like a massive bell. The maintenance tunnel was cramped and poorly lit, designed for automated repair drones rather than human occupation, but it offered protection from the chaos that was about to engulf the surface. Scout had become remarkably calm once they were inside the tunnel system. The young creature seemed to understand that they were now in a relatively safe location, and it began making soft, reassuring sounds that Marcus found unexpectedly comforting. There was something about Scout's presence that made even this desperate situation feel manageable. Well, Scout, this isn't exactly how I planned to spend my afternoon, Marcus said as he activated his suit's emergency lighting and began moving deeper into the tunnel system. But at least we're in this together. The first impacts of a swarm against the processing unit's exterior sounded like artillery bombardment. The massive insect struck the metal structures with enough force to create vibrations that Marcus could feel through the tunnel walls. But beneath the chaos of the attack, he could also hear something else, the roars and battle cries of Scout's pack as they engaged the swarm in desperate combat. Scout became agitated at the sounds of conflict, chirping urgently while trying to climb back toward the tunnel entrance. The young creature clearly wanted to help its family, but Marcus gently restrained it while trying to provide comfort. I know you want to help them, Scout, but you're still injured. The best thing we can do is stay safe, so they don't have to worry about protecting us while they fight. The battle raged above them for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Marcus's suit sensors detected massive energy discharges as the processing unit's automated defense systems engaged the swarm, adding their firepower to the pack's natural weapons. The combination of alien claws and human technology created a devastating defensive response that gradually began to turn the tide of the conflict. But it was Scout who provided the key to ultimate victory. The young creature began producing a series of high-pitched vocalizations unlike anything Marcus had heard before, sounds that somehow interfered with the swarm's coordination. Through his suit's external audio pickups, Marcus could hear the insects becoming confused and disoriented as Scout's calls disrupted whatever communication system they used to maintain their formation. Scout, you brilliant little genius, Marcus said in amazement as he realized what was happening. "You're jamming their frequency." The young predator continued its acoustic assault on the swarm, while Marcus used his suit's communication system to amplify and broadcast the signal. The combination of Scout's natural ability and human technology created a disruption field that sent the remaining insects fleeing in chaotic retreat, their perfect formation shattered by the unexpected sonic interference. When the sounds of battle finally faded, Marcus and Scout cautiously made their way back to the tunnel entrance. The landscape outside had been transformed by the conflict. The ground was littered with the remains of fallen insects, while scorch marks from energy weapons decorated the processing unit's hull. But the pack had survived, though several members showed obvious signs of injury from the desperate fight. The pack leader approached the tunnel entrance as Marcus and Scout emerged, and the reunion between the young creature and its family was deeply moving. Scout chirped excitedly as it described their experience in the tunnels, while the adults listened with obvious relief and pride. The pack leader then turned to Marcus and made a vocalization that needed no translation. It was clearly an expression of gratitude. "Control, this is Gamma 7 reporting all clear," Marcus called as he surveyed the aftermath of the battle. "The swarm has been repelled through a combination of automated defenses and indigenous assistance. I'm ready to resume maintenance operations." The response was immediate and predictably bureaucratic. "Negative, Gamma 7. Extraction teams are en route with full xenobiological support staff. You will remain in position until proper first contact protocols can be implemented." Marcus looked at Scout, who was already beginning to settle back into its comfortable position on his environmental suit, and at the pack members who were resuming their relaxed postures around the processing unit. The idea of turning this remarkable partnership over to bureaucrats and researchers made his stomach turn. "Control, I understand the need for proper protocols, but I think it's important to note that we've moved beyond first contact here. We've established a working relationship, and these beings have repeatedly demonstrated intelligence, cooperation, and courage. Any future interactions need to be based on respect for their autonomy and social structure." As if to emphasize his point, Scout began teaching the pack members the human melody it had learned earlier, creating a harmonic arrangement that echoed beautifully among the metal structures of the processing facility. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, a bridge of music connecting two completely different forms of consciousness. The pack leader approached Marcus one final time before the extraction teams arrived, and in a gesture that would become legendary among xenobiologists, it carefully placed one massive claw on Marcus's helmet in what was clearly a formal farewell. The creature's eyes met Marcus's gaze through his visor, and in that moment, both beings understood that they had participated in something historic. Scout made soft, questioning sounds as the roar of approaching aircraft began to fill the toxic sky. The young creature clearly didn't understand why their peaceful afternoon was about to be disrupted by the arrival of more humans, and Marcus found himself dreading the explanations he would have to provide. "Don't worry, Scout," Marcus said quietly as the first extraction shuttle appeared on the horizon. "I promise that whatever happens next, I'll make sure your family is treated with the respect they deserve. You've all earned that much and more." The remarkable working relationship between human maintenance worker and alien predator pack was about to become the subject of intense scientific scrutiny, but Marcus knew that the bonds forged during their shared crisis would endure long after the researchers and bureaucrats had filed their reports. Scout had shown him that intelligence and cooperation could bridge any gap between species, and that understanding was too important to be lost in the maze of official protocols that was about to descend upon them. The extraction team that descended from the gray skies of Kepler 442c was unlike anything Marcus had encountered in his 8 years of working frontier worlds. Instead of the usual emergency medical team and armed security escort, 3 massive shuttles disgorged a small army of scientists, xenobiologists, communication specialists, and enough military hardware to invade a small planet. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead xenobiologist, approached Marcus's position with obvious caution, her environmental suit bristling with recording equipment and sensor arrays. Behind her walked a delegation that read like a who's who of the Galactic Council's first contact specialists, each one more eager than the last to document what they were already calling the most significant interspecies breakthrough in galactic history. Mr. Chun, Dr. Vasquez called through the comm system as she stopped at what she evidently considered a safe distance from the predator pack. I need you to very slowly and carefully move away from the indigenous creatures. We have containment protocols in place and sedation equipment ready if necessary. Marcus felt Scout tense against his back at the mention of sedation, and the pack leader's scales immediately shifted to aggressive warning colors. The adults rose from their relaxed positions and began moving into defensive formations, clearly perceiving the approaching humans as a potential threat to their young pack member. Dr. Vasquez, I appreciate your concern, but sedation won't be necessary, Marcus said firmly. These beings are intelligent and cooperative. They've been helping me with maintenance work for the past 6 hours, and they just fought alongside our automated defenses to repel a major insect swarm. Any aggressive action toward them would be both unnecessary and potentially disastrous for future relations. The lead scientist activated her suit's external speakers and began addressing the pack in what Marcus recognized as the standard first contact greeting protocols used by the Galactic Council. The artificial, stilted phrases of the diplomatic translator software created a harsh contrast to the musical vocalizations that Marcus had been enjoying all day. Scout responded to the formal greeting with what Marcus could only interpret as confusion and mild annoyance. The young creature chirped questioningly to its pack leader, who made dismissive sounds in return. The entire pack seemed unimpressed by the humans' diplomatic overtures, preferring to focus their attention on Marcus as the only member of his species who had proven trustworthy. Mr. Chun, we need you to explain to the creatures that we represent peaceful intentions and wish to establish formal diplomatic contact, Dr. Vasquez called out, apparently unaware of the irony in her request. With respect, Doctor, I don't speak their language any better than you do. The communication we've established is based on trust, cooperation, and shared experience. You can't replicate that with translation software and diplomatic protocols. To demonstrate his point, Marcus began whistling the melody that had become his signature tune with Scout. The young creature immediately joined in with harmonic accompaniment, followed by the deep voices of the adult pack members. Within moments, the area around Processing Unit 9 was filled with the same beautiful alien music that had marked the beginning of their remarkable partnership. The effect on the scientific team was immediate and dramatic. Several researchers began frantically adjusting their recording equipment to capture the musical exchange, while others stood in obvious amazement at the sophistication of the harmonic arrangements. Dr. Vasquez herself removed her helmet despite the toxic atmosphere, relying on her suit's emergency air supply to get clearer audio recordings of the unprecedented musical cooperation between species. Incredible, she whispered, her voice carrying clearly through the comm system. The harmonic complexity suggests advanced cognitive processing and cultural development. Mr. Chun, how did you discover their musical capabilities? I didn't discover anything, Doctor. Scout taught me. The young creature on my back has been my partner and teacher for the entire day. These beings aren't subject for study. They're individuals with their own intelligence, culture, and social structures. Scout seemed to understand that it was the center of attention and began demonstrating some of the cooperative behaviors it had learned during the maintenance work. The young creature used its claws to manipulate small tools with surprising dexterity, while making sounds that Marcus had learned to associate with different types of equipment. The pack leader watched the demonstration with obvious pride, occasionally adding its own vocalizations that served as encouragement or instruction. Dr. Vasquez approached closer, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. Mr. Chun, would it be possible for you to facilitate a more formal exchange? We have communication equipment that might allow for more complex interaction. Marcus looked at Scout, who tilted its head in the characteristic gesture of curiosity that he'd come to recognize. I can try, but any communication equipment needs to be presented carefully. Scout's family has already shown that they can perceive threats, and they're very protective of their young. The pack leader seemed to understand that some form of negotiation was taking place and approached to within a few meters of Dr. Vasquez. The massive predator settled into the same non-threatening sitting position it had used with Marcus, though its scales maintained the cautious coloration that indicated continued wariness. Scout made a series of soft chirping sounds toward the pack leader, then climbed higher up Marcus's back to a position where it could see all the humans clearly. The young creature began a complex vocalization that lasted several minutes, during which it occasionally pointed at Marcus, then at the other humans, then at various pieces of equipment. Marcus had the distinct impression that Scout was explaining the situation to its family in terms that they could understand. When Scout finished its explanation, the pack leader made what sounded like a decision. The massive creature approached Dr. Vasquez with careful deliberation and extended one claw toward her in the same gesture of peaceful contact it had offered Marcus earlier. Dr. Vasquez, I think you're being invited to shake hands, Marcus said quietly. This is exactly what happened with me earlier. It's a conscious gesture of peaceful intent. The xenobiologist looked at the extended claw with obvious fascination and carefully reached out with her gloved hand. The moment of contact between human scientist and alien predator was recorded by dozens of cameras and would later become one of the most famous images in the history of interspecies relations. The pack leader's response to the contact was immediately positive. Its scales shifted to the beautiful blue and gold coloration that Marcus had learned to associate with contentment, and it made soft, welcoming sounds toward the other members of the research team. Scout chirped excitedly and began climbing down from Marcus's back, apparently eager to meet more of these new human creatures. What followed was unlike any first contact scenario in the textbooks. Instead of formal diplomatic exchanges or careful biological assessments, the afternoon turned into something resembling a cross-cultural workshop. Scout served as an enthusiastic translator and teacher, demonstrating the musical communication system while the adults patiently allowed themselves to be recorded and studied. The pack members showed genuine interest in human technology, particularly the tools and equipment used for maintenance work. Several adults learned to operate simple devices under Scout's guidance, while the younger creature proudly showed off its ability to help with mechanical tasks. The researchers found themselves not just studying an alien species, but collaborating with them on practical projects. Dr. Vasquez was particularly amazed by the pack's social structure and learning capabilities. Mr. Chun, what we're witnessing here challenges everything we thought we knew about predator species development. These beings show evidence of individual personality, complex social roles, technological aptitude, and artistic expression. They're not just intelligent, they're culturally sophisticated. I tried to tell Control that hours ago, Marcus replied as he watched Scout teaching a young researcher how to harmonize with alien vocalizations. These aren't the mindless killers described in the survey reports. They're people, just not human people. The pack leader seemed to sense the positive change in the human's attitude and made a decision that surprised everyone present. The massive creature began calling to other areas around the processing facility, using long-range vocalizations that carried for kilometers across the toxic landscape. Within an hour, additional pack members began arriving, not in aggressive formation, but in small family groups that included more young creatures like Scout. It appears we're being introduced to the extended family, Dr. Vasquez observed as she watched a group of juveniles approach with obvious curiosity about the human visitors. This suggests a level of social trust that typically takes years to develop in first contact situations. Scout had become the unofficial ambassador between the species, moving freely between human researchers and alien pack members while facilitating communication and demonstrating cooperative activities. The young creature's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon both humans and aliens were working together on various projects around the processing facility. The resulting translation was crude and often unclear, but it represented the first time in galactic history that human technology had successfully interpreted the language of this particular species. Greetings, Skyworkers, gratitude for young one healing, share knowledge, build friendship. The mechanical translation was halting and incomplete, but the meaning was unmistakable. The pack was formally welcoming the humans and expressing interest in continued cooperation. Marcus found himself serving as both translator and cultural advisor as the afternoon progressed. His unique relationship with Scout and the pack leader provided insights that no amount of scientific equipment could replicate. He explained the musical communication system, the cooperative work behaviors, and the sophisticated social structures he had observed during his extended interaction with the aliens. Dr. Vasquez, I think what we're seeing here is the beginning of something unprecedented, Marcus said as he watched human children and alien juveniles engaged in what could only be described as interspecies play. These beings aren't just intelligent. They're eager to learn about us and share their own knowledge. This could be the foundation for a partnership that benefits both species. The xenobiologist nodded thoughtfully as she reviewed her recordings of the day's interactions. Mr. Chun, I believe you're absolutely right. What started as a simple maintenance shift has become the most successful first contact in Galactic Council history. The question now is how we build on this foundation without destroying what you and Scout have created. As the toxic sun began setting over Kepler, 442C's hostile landscape, Marcus realized that his simple act of kindness toward an injured young creature had fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with one of the galaxy's most misunderstood species. Scout nestled contentedly against his chest as they watched the human researchers and alien pack members working together to complete the day's maintenance tasks, their cooperation creating a harmony that extended far beyond mere music. 6 months after that extraordinary first contact, Marcus Chun stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Kepler 442C Cooperative Research Station, watching human children and young predators play together in the facility's central courtyard. The sight that had once seemed impossible was now simply part of daily life at what had become a galaxy's most successful interspecies colony. Scout, now fully grown, but still preferring to ride on Marcus's shoulders during important occasions, chirped contentedly as they observed the afternoon activities below. The young predator had become something of a celebrity throughout the galaxy, featured in documentary films and scientific journals as the individual who had made peaceful contact between species possible. But to Marcus, Scout was simply the friend who had taught him that understanding could bridge any gap between different forms of consciousness. Marcus, we need you in conference room 3. Dr. Vasquez called through the facility's comm system. The Galactic Council representatives are ready for your final presentation. The presentation Marcus was about to deliver would determine the future of human-predator cooperation throughout the galaxy. The Kepler 442C project had been so successful that dozens of other worlds were requesting similar cooperative arrangements. But the Council needed assurance that the partnership could be safely replicated elsewhere. Scout climbed down from Marcus's shoulders as they entered the conference room, moving with the fluid grace that had made the predator species such effective hunters before they became humanity's unlikely partners. The young alien settled into the specially designed chair that had become its regular spot during official meetings, its scales shifting to the formal blue-gold coloration that indicated serious attention. The Council representatives included species from across the galaxy, many of whom had initially been skeptical about the possibility of cooperative relationships with predator species. Ambassador Kelthra of the Centauri Federation had been particularly vocal in her concerns about the safety implications of working closely with creatures capable of killing armed soldiers with their bare claws. Mr. Chun, Ambassador Kelthra began, her translator device rendering her crystalline voice into standard galactic. The Council appreciates the remarkable success you've achieved here on Kepler 442C. However, we must address the concerns of member species who fear that your methods cannot be safely replicated on worlds with different environmental conditions or social structures. Marcus activated the holographic display system and began his presentation with images from that first day when Scout had climbed onto his arm as an injured youngster. Ambassador, I understand those concerns, but I think they're based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what we've accomplished here. We haven't tamed or domesticated these beings. We've learned to communicate and cooperate with them as equals. Scout made a series of soft vocalizations that the room's translation system rendered into standard galactic as humans learn quickly. Good partners for building and creating, safe for young ones. The simple statement carried enormous weight coming from one of the first members of the species to establish long-term contact with humanity. The presentation continued with documentation of the remarkable achievements that had resulted from human-predator cooperation. The atmospheric processing efficiency on Kepler 442c had improved by 300% since the partnership began. Hostile wildlife attacks on human settlements had dropped to zero as the predators served as both protectors and early warning systems for their human partners. Perhaps most importantly, Marcus continued, we've discovered that these beings possess technological insights that complement human engineering approaches. Their natural understanding of acoustic frequencies has revolutionized our communication systems, while their instinctive grasp of ecological balance has improved our terraforming techniques beyond anything we achieved independently. Dr. Vasquez added her scientific perspective to the presentation, showing neurological scans that demonstrated the predator's intelligence levels were comparable to or superior to most spacefaring species. The Council needs to understand that we're not talking about animal training or behavioral modification. We're documenting genuine interspecies cooperation between cognitive equals. Ambassador Kelthera reviewed the data with obvious fascination, but her concerns remain practical. Dr. Vasquez, Mr. Chun, the successes you've documented are impressive, but how can we ensure that other human workers will be able to replicate Mr. Chen's unique relationship with these creatures? Not everyone possesses his particular combination of patience, intuition, and musical ability. Scout stood up from its chair and approached the ambassador's position, moving with careful deliberation to avoid triggering any defensive reactions. The young predator extended one claw in a gesture of peaceful contact that had become the standard greeting between the species, waiting patiently for the ambassador to respond. After a moment of hesitation, Ambassador Kelthera reached out and touched Scout's claw with one of her own crystalline appendages. The contact created a brief harmonic resonance as the two different forms of matter interacted, and Scout responded with delighted chirping at the unexpected musical effect. Ambassador, Marcus said quietly, Scout just demonstrated the key to successful cooperation. These beings don't require special human characteristics. They respond to respect, honesty, and genuine goodwill. Any human worker who approaches them with those qualities can establish positive relationships. The ambassador's expression softened as she continued her contact with Scout, clearly moved by the young alien's obvious intelligence and gentleness. Mr. Chun, I begin to understand what you've accomplished here, but the Council will require extensive safety protocols and training programs before we can approve expansion to other worlds. Of course, Marcus agreed. We've already developed comprehensive training curricula based on the experiences of the 47 human workers who have successfully integrated into mixed teams here on Kepler 442c. The program focuses on communication techniques, cooperative work methods, and mutual respect protocols. Scout returned to its chair and began a complex vocalization that lasted several minutes. The translation system worked hard to render the sophisticated concepts into standard galactic, producing a statement that surprised everyone in the room. My people have discussed this proposal extensively. We are willing to send teaching families to other worlds where humans need partners. We believe cooperation makes both species stronger and safer. The revelation that the predator species had been conducting their own diplomatic discussions about expansion was a breakthrough that changed the entire dynamic of the negotiations. The council representatives spent the rest of the session asking detailed questions about predator social structures, decision-making processes, and territorial requirements for establishing new cooperative colonies. By the end of the presentation, the vote to approve expanded human-predator cooperation was unanimous. Ambassador Kelthra personally commended Marcus for his role in establishing what she called the most successful interspecies partnership in galactic history. As the council representatives departed to begin planning the expansion program, Marcus and Scout found themselves alone in the conference room, surrounded by the holographic displays that documented their remarkable journey from that first encounter beside Processing Unit 7. Well, Scout, it looks like our little friendship is about to become a galaxy-wide phenomenon, Marcus said as he scratched behind the young predator's head in the spot that always made it purr with contentment. Are you ready to become a teacher to other humans and predators? Scout responded with a musical trill that the translation system rendered as ready to help families find each other. Good partnerships make universe safer for all young ones. The simple wisdom of the statement captured everything that Marcus had learned about cooperation, understanding, and the bridges that could be built between different forms of consciousness. Later that evening, Marcus stood once again on the observation deck, watching the lights of the research station twinkle in the darkness. Scout had curled up beside him in the relaxed position that had become their standard configuration for quiet moments. In the distance, he could see the glow of processing units where human workers and predator partners continued their round-the-clock efforts to transform Kepler 442c into a world suitable for both species. The communication system chimed with an incoming message from Earth, and Marcus smiled as he recognized the voice of his former supervisor from his early days working dangerous frontier world alone. Marcus, I've been following the news about your little project out there. The Colonial Authority wants to know if you'd be interested in heading up the new Interspecies Cooperation Department. Apparently, they think you've got a knack for making friends with things that used to eat people. Marcus looked down at Scout, who had tilted its head in the characteristic expression of curiosity that had begun their friendship 6 months ago. The young predator's scales shifted through patterns of gold and blue that Marcus had learned to associate with contentment and anticipation. What do you think, Scout? Ready to help me teach the galaxy that friendship is possible between any two species willing to treat each other with respect? Scout's response was a complex musical phrase that needed no translation. It was the same harmonic pattern they had created together on that first day, now enriched with months of shared experiences and mutual trust. As their duet echoed through the observation deck, Marcus realized that he was no longer just a maintenance worker who had gotten lucky with an injured alien. He had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a bridge between species, a teacher of cooperation, and proof that understanding could triumph over fear. The stars above Kepler 442c shone down on a world that had been transformed from a hostile death trap into a beacon of interspecies harmony. And at the center of that transformation was a simple friendship between a human maintenance worker and a young predator who had taught each other that intelligence, courage, and compassion were universal languages that could unite any two beings willing to listen. In the months and years that would follow, similar partnerships would develop on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Human children would grow up considering predator companions as natural as breathing, while young predators would learn human songs and human values alongside their own ancient traditions. The galaxy would become a safer, more cooperative place because of the lessons learned from one man's willingness to help an injured creature and one young alien's decision to trust a strange being who sang to the stars. And through it all, Marcus and Scout would continue their work together, no longer as maintenance worker and passenger, but as partners in the greatest adventure of all, building bridges of understanding across the vast darkness of space, proving that friendship truly was the most powerful force in the universe.